On August 14, 2005, a Boeing 737 belonging to Helios Airways lifted off from Larnaca International Airport in Cyprus, heading toward Athens, Greece. On board were 115 passengers and 6 crew members. It was a sunny morning, and families, children, and holidaymakers filled the cabin. No one could have predicted that within minutes of departure, a chain of technical faults, oversights, and human errors would transform this flight into one of the most chilling mysteries in aviation history. By the time the plane reached its cruising altitude of 34,000 feet, every single person on board had fallen silent. For hours, the aircraft continued on autopilot, drifting across the skies above Europe like a ghost, unresponsive to air traffic control and unhearing of the frantic calls from the ground. It became known to the world as the ghost plane. The very phrase evokes unease. A machine still flying, engines roaring, wings steady, but inside only silence, frozen faces, and lives already extinguished. The Helios Airways Flight 52 disaster is remembered not only because of the tragic loss of 121 lives but also because of the haunting sequence of events that led to it. Aviation, an industry built on precision and layers of safety, revealed its vulnerability that day. The story is not only about technical failure but about human error, missed opportunities, and the terrifying reality of hypoxia, the slow suffocation caused by lack of oxygen at high altitude. This was not an instant disaster like an explosion or collision. It was slow, invisible, and merciless, unfolding step by step while the outside world watched powerless. In the hours leading up to the crash, there were multiple points where the tragedy might have been avoided. The aircraft had undergone maintenance the night before. During those checks, engineers set the pressurization system to manual mode rather than automatic. When the plane took off, this small but crucial detail meant the cabin could not regulate its internal pressure as it climbed higher. To the entrained passenger, nothing felt unusual at first, maybe just a bit of discomfort in the ears, a mild pressure like what many travelers experience. But as the aircraft rose to cruising altitude, the oxygen in the cabin thinned rapidly. Hypoxia began to set in, a condition where the body and brain are deprived of oxygen. The cruel danger of hypoxia is that it creeps in silently. Victims often feel lightheaded, euphoric, or simply drowsy. Within minutes, judgment is impaired, coordination falters, and then consciousness slips away. Passengers may not even realize they are suffocating. They may think they are simply tired, closing their eyes for a nap, unaware that their minds are being starved of air. For the crew of Helios 522, this is exactly what happened. Inside the cockpit, warning alarms blared, but they were misunderstood. Instead of recognizing the depressurization alarm, the pilots mistook it for a takeoff configuration warning, a sound they were more familiar with. Confusion clouded their judgment, and oxygen deprivation dulled their ability to reason. Meanwhile, on the ground, air traffic controllers in Athens grew concerned. The plane was due to establish radio contact as it approached Greek airspace, but repeated calls went unanswered. The aircraft, however, stayed perfectly on course, guided by its autopilot system. To outside observers, nothing appeared wrong. The plane's altitude and heading remained stable, but the silence from within told a different story. Hours ticked by, and still no word came from the cockpit. This was when the chilling realization dawned. The plane was flying itself, but everyone inside could already be incapacitated. Greek fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the airliner. As they approached, the sight that greeted the pilots remains one of the most haunting images in aviation history. The plane was still steady in the sky, but the cockpit windows revealed motionless figures. The captain slumped at the controls, unresponsive. In the cabin, passengers sat eerily still in their seats, oxygen masks dangling uselessly from above. The masks had deployed automatically when cabin pressure fell, but for many, it was already too late to put them on properly. In some cases, the masks provided only limited time before oxygen supply ran out. From the fighter's vantage point, it was a flying tomb, suspended in the air by the autopilot, carrying silent souls through the empty blue sky. And yet, there was one flicker of movement. In the cockpit, a flight attendant named Andreas Prodromou, who had managed to remain conscious longer thanks to portable oxygen, was seen entering the controls. He was a trained pilot in training, though not officially a captain, and he tried desperately to save the plane. The fighter pilots reported seeing him wrestling with the controls, attempting to take command. His efforts were heroic, but by then the situation was almost irreversible. Fuel was running low, the engines were straining, and communication systems remained silent. Within minutes, one engine sputtered and failed from fuel starvation. The aircraft began to lose altitude. Moments later, the second engine cut out. The Boeing 737 descended helplessly, its silence broken only by the rush of air.
In the aftermath, investigators pieced together the sequence of failures. The pressurization system left in manual mode. The misunderstood alarms. The incapacitation of the crew due to hypoxia. The lack of oxygen reserves sufficient to sustain passengers until descent. Every layer of safety that was supposed to prevent disaster had collapsed one after another. The final report concluded that the direct cause was crew incapacitation due to hypoxia, but underneath lay systemic failures in training, maintenance procedures, and safety oversight. What made this tragedy resonate worldwide was not just the crash itself, but the eerie image of a plane flying alone for hours, passengers unconscious, while the world tried to reach them. It was as though the aircraft had become a ghost, trapped between life and death, drifting above the earth with its story written in silence. The haunting phrase "ghost plane" entered aviation history, later used to describe other incidents where planes continued on autopilot after losing contact. For the families of the victims, the pain was unimaginable. Many had boarded the flight casually, expecting a short journey to Athens for holidays or business. Among the passengers were children, couples, tourists, and workers commuting home. The cruel irony was that they were not lost instantly, but slowly, unknowingly, as life ebbed away at 34,000 feet. Survivors' families later described the torment of imagining their loved ones slipping into unconsciousness, unable to fight back, unaware that death was approaching. In aviation, every tragedy is supposed to teach lessons to prevent another. After Helios Flight 522, international attention focused on pressurization systems, crew training for hypoxia recognition, and clearer alarm designs to prevent misinterpretation. Pilots are now drilled repeatedly to recognize the signs of oxygen deprivation because the body cannot be trusted in such conditions. The brain may feel fine even as it shuts down. Simulator sessions recreate hypoxia scenarios so that flight crews will never mistake its symptoms for fatigue or distraction. But despite these improvements, the story of the ghost plane continues to haunt. It taps into one of humanity's deepest fears, being trapped in an enclosed space, cut off from help, slowly losing consciousness while the world outside goes on unaware. Unlike fiery crashes or violent explosions, this was a silent catastrophe, invisible to those on board until it was too late. The imagery of oxygen masks dangling, of a lone attendant making a last, desperate attempt to steer, of fighter pilots peering into lifeless cabins is etched into collective memory. Even years later, the name Helios 522 invokes unease. Aviation experts discuss it as a case study, a reminder of how small oversights can cascade into unstoppable disaster. Families remember it as the day their loved ones never returned.
And to the public, it remains a ghost story written not in fiction, but in the skies above Europe, when 121 people flew together into silence. The mystery lies not in what happened that is known, but in how ordinary systems and ordinary humans failed so tragically at the same time. It is a reminder that machines can fly, but without human judgment and oxygen to sustain it, a plane becomes just that, a ghost in motion. And as the wreckage of Flight 522 was cleared from the hills of Greece, the world was left with an unforgettable image, a silent plane steady in the sky, full of lives that had already slipped away long before it touched the ground.